Hello, I'm Pastor Chris Barash of Good Shepherd Lutheran Church here in Palos Heights. And one of the big challenges in our world today is that we have information literally at our fingertips. But with all that information, how is it that we go about deciding what to listen to, what not to listen to, what to take seriously, what to see as fiction, what to see as truth? It's an ongoing challenge as we strive to use information to make meaningful, important decisions in our life. And that's the inspiration behind this month's Community Bridge. As I welcome here Bob Bong. Bob, thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm editor right now of the Regional and the Reporter newspapers. And in 1976, I started this career path at a paper in South Chicago called the Daily Calumet. And from there to the Daily Southtown, where I was there for over 20 years. And about 11 years now with this newspaper group that owns the Regional and the Reporter.
Wow, so you have been in print media forever. Yeah, fantastic. So what inspired you to pursue a career in media?
My mom, she was a reporter.
Okay.
Yeah, she used to work for the Hammond Times.
Okay.
And just watching her and listening to her and my dad talk after she would cover a meeting or something like that just piqued my interest. When I got into high school, I wrote for the school newspaper there. Got into college, wrote for the school newspaper there, was editor of that paper. And actually, my senior year, I got offered the job at the Daily Calumet. And so my last 6 months of college, I was working full-time at the paper. So.
Fantastic. So you have known nothing else other than media.
Yes.
Wow. So what are some of the things over the time that you've served in the media that you've seen change with print media?
Well, in the early days when we would cut and paste, we would actually have a glue pot on our desk and a pair of scissors, and you would cut the stories and glue them together. Now cut and paste, of course, is just an electronic gadget in the computers. And then we went from there to the first generation of BDTs, the computers. And then now we're at full-blown laptops, and you can work anywhere. I could work in McDonald's parking lot if I wanted to. Okay. Which I have done once or twice.
Well, I won't hold you to it or ask any follow-up on that, but certainly it sounds like technology has certainly advanced.
Technology has made the biggest change in the industry in the last 50 years I've been around.
Okay.
And like I said, it went from where you had to be in the office typing up your story that you can now type it up on. I work at home on my kitchen table. I can work in the parking lot of McDonald's. People work at Starbucks. You know, you can work in your bathtub if you wanted to.
Wow. So a lot of flexibility that technology has brought about.
Yes.
Particularly with print media. Now I'm thinking about media in general has changed quite drastically over your time serving in it. What are some of the significant changes that you've witnessed, been a part of, or had to see transition through?
The news broadcasts, the stations like CNN and Fox News, which didn't exist back in those days. In those days, you watched your channel 5 or 2 or 7, you know, and you got 15 minutes of national news, and then you got a half-hour local news, and then that was it. Now you've got 24-hour news channels. You've got Channel 9 comes on the air at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they go till 10 o'clock for local news. So that's a big change in the way electronic journalism has taken over. And you can tell by the size of the newspapers. Newspapers, it doesn't matter what newspaper you're talking about, they're tiny compared to how they used to be. The Sunday Tribune used to be this thick. Now the Sunday Tribune might be that thick. And that's just a result of there's no advertising. People get their news from their phones, or they get it from their computers, or they get it from television. And sometimes you get a skimpy report. The best part of the old newspaper was it was a lot longer and it was more detailed. Now you get 60 minutes or 60 seconds of news on the TV or the streaming, and that's not enough to really tackle a lot of the complicated issues in our day that we have.
Yeah. You mentioned how these issues that you're reporting oftentimes have significant nuance or are complicated. and that 24-hour news cycle has drastically changed the way in which those things come out. Sometimes they're said with those nuances, and sometimes those nuances are clipped down to a very quick soundbite, like you alluded to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the old days, you could, excuse me, the newspaper would report the news from Tuesday. You'd read it on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Now it happens on Tuesday. You read it 10 minutes later or a half hour later. Mm. And then the next day, it's like, unless it's something really complicated or scandalous, you're going to forget about it after 24 hours. Mm. And it's a lot less thoughtful than it used to be. Mm. Reporters would be thoughtful in their reporting, and you got a much better picture of the event, whether it was a fire or a crime or a political story or even a village board meeting. Mm.
So your role right now is that of an editor. So reporters submit stories, you look, evaluate them, you edit, clean them up. You also make decisions on kind of what you pass along into the publisher and not. How is it that you as an editor choose to decide what gets pursued for the reporter as well as what gets published in the paper?
Well, a lot of it is timeliness.
Okay.
You want your stories in as quickly as possible. And a lot of it is you have to have a good judge of what the interest of the community is.
Okay.
And there's two kinds of stories. There's your news stories, which come from the police station or the village board or city hall or wherever it happens to come from. And then you have your feature stories, which are much more fun to report on and to write. Like if it's a lady doing goat yoga in Orland Park, or if it's we just had a bocce ball tournament at Mama Vesuvio's over here that we covered, and an 87-year-old guy was one of the bocce ball players.
Wow.
And he was telling us how he'd been playing that since he was like 4 years old back in Italy.
Wow.
So those are the fun stories.
Yeah.
And and then the other ones are like, yeah, there's a new police contract, and they're going to put a new sidewalk in over here, which you have to have, but it's not fun.
Okay.
But it's interesting news that people have to, they're putting a sidewalk in front of my house.
Yeah, so it sounds like you feel that news has somewhat of a responsibility to share information, even if it's not the fun information about a sidewalk or so. But
Right.
Also then there's a lot of fun things that are uplifting and just enjoyable in the community.
Yes.
I'd love to go back to what you said, though, about choosing news. So in regards to deciding what it is that's to publish or not to publish, as an editor, how do you go about evaluating the work that a reporter has done to discern whether this is something that, hey, we're going to put our name behind, we're going to put the power of the publishing company behind it, or you know what, this needs a little bit more work, we can't put our name behind that right now?
Okay, well, first thing you have to read the story as it's submitted by the reporter. And then you ask those questions of yourself. Is it all here? Is it not all here? And not every story comes in complete. And we've kicked back stories and said, you need to go talk to the mayor, you need to go talk to this guy or that guy, and you got to get some more background on the story. But for the most part, the reporters we have now are pretty good at our place. And they don't get stories kicked back very often. But now and again, they have to do a little bit more reporting on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. As I look at the way that I've experienced media now, where somebody can sit at their computer, type out whatever, and then just post it on their website or on social media, that role of the editor just gets, that asks some hard questions or some probing questions, gets completely bypassed.
It does, as well as the copy editing part of it.
Okay, speak more to that.
You ever read a story online and you go, man, who wrote this thing? And they can't think, names are spelled wrong or verb tenses are wrong. Copy editing is gone.
Yeah.
When I was coming up through the ranks, your story got read by 2 people before it ever got in a paper. Now a reporter turns it in, I read it, and that's it. And if I miss it, it just skipped by, it gets into the paper. So copy editing used to be an art. Copy editors were really valued in the old days. And websites don't have them. Our newspaper doesn't have one really. And it's papers have lost that. And not just that, communication has lost that. Because a good copy editor will sometimes say, hey, I think you missed something here, and kick it back. But they were good about spell checking and fact checking and just making sure your names are spelled right, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Well, when you said, so you bring up the copy editor as well as editing in general, and you mentioned the word just recently, fact checking. So what are some things that you would recommend, or that some insights from your experience that you would share with people to say, hey, when you're choosing what to listen to, or when you're reading an article, pay attention to this to recognize if this is valid information, if this is helpful information, or if maybe this information and the news that you're getting here is a little incomplete or is promoting some type of agenda that might be more of an editorial issue than it is actually reporting the news.
I've had this conversation with people, and I tell them the best way to think you're getting the true story is to have a variety of sources. Don't just rely on Fox News or CNN or Channel 9 or whoever you go to for your news, because there's a million websites out there, but a lot of them have a specific slant. They're conservative ones, or they're leftist ones, or they're just crazy ones. And there's a lot of crazy ones out there. And if you read 2 or 3 good ones, you know, what you consider to be true, and like anything that comes from AP, I think is pretty accurate.
Okay.
Anything that comes from a legitimate newspaper, like a Tribune or a Washington Post or a New York Times, as opposed to Epoch Times, which has got a very specific slant. And you can get a well-rounded view of any topic or any news story. Don't just rely on Fox News. Don't rely on CNN, because they're going to give you the story that they are slanting. Fox News does it, CNN does it, everybody does it. So if you get a well-rounded source of information, and don't go to Facebook. Facebook is the last place to get your news from, because it's filled with all of these websites. And you know, and it's like, oh, I read that, it was this. And no, you read it from some crazy people. You know, you got to forget the crazy people. Got to go to legitimate news sources. And if you do that, you get a well-rounded view. Often, if you go to a foreign news source, like the BBC, you get an unfiltered view of what happened. Because every American station or newspaper or media outlet is going to have an American point of view on something. If you go to a BBC point of view, none of that's there. So you get a much more factual, accurate depiction of what happened or what's going on.
Yeah, I will say that actually BBC has become one of my go-tos in regards to finding out just the facts around things without a bit of the slant.
They leave it out.
Yeah.
They leave the point of view out of it.
Yeah. Another avenue where a lot of individuals seem to be getting their news is from things that are specifically set up not as news sources but as more entertainment. I think of the late night talk shows that do comedy work or so. They're obviously presenting the news, but then they present a very, very extreme slant one way or the other, or in some fashion.
Satirical.
Or very much satirical. What would you say to somebody that feels that that's sufficient for what they need to know, whether it's a diet of just the late night television or a diet strictly of a place that leans more conservative or more liberal? What would you say to them?
Well, your late night guys are, they're going for laughs. So they're going to make everything funny, and they're going to poke fun at whoever it is, whether it's Biden or Trump or Harris or even other celebrities. So you have to go into it with an idea that this is not coming at you as news. And some people don't. Some people think they see something. Well, it's got to be true because Jimmy Kimmel said it. Well, no, Jimmy Kimmel hates Trump. So it doesn't matter what he says about it. So you have to understand that part of it going in. It's like if you watch Saturday Night Live. That's not news. You know, you're not getting true news. You're getting news with a joke part of it. And as long as you know that you're getting a joke news, you're okay. But sometimes satirical stories wind up being considered factual stories. And that's where the line gets crossed, and you got to remember where the source of the story comes from. If it comes from The Onion, it's not true.
Yeah. Good. So I recently encountered this term, and I think we've danced around it, but I want you to speak to it and how you see it, or whether you think it's appropriate or not, of media diet. In the same way that we're called to have a healthy diet of that's varied between, you know, vegetables, fruits, protein, in the sense, and having all of that on our plate. There's the suggestion is that we need a healthy media diet and not fill up just on, you know, meat, not just on junk food, not just on whatever it is. What would you describe as a good way to ensure that as we're striving to get valid information and use that information to make decisions, we're preparing ourselves or providing ourselves with a healthy media diet?
Okay, well, like you said, meat and potatoes is your mainstream news, even though that's not a good word anymore, mainstream news. But that's where you should be getting your meat and potatoes from. And then if you want to put some salt and some pepper and some other spices on it, then you would branch out to other sources like, I don't want to say CNN or Fox News because they're part of the mainstream. But other places like, I'm trying to think of, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but they're out there and you would find them, and that would give you some more slanted news to go with the meat and potatoes. And you put it all together, and it's just like when you're eating a regular diet. You know, you're gonna, maybe I don't like the cauliflower today, maybe I like peas tomorrow, that kind of thing. You would more likely to say, well, I'll watch CNN today, I'll watch Fox News tomorrow, and I'll watch MSNBC the next day, and then I'll watch Newsmax to see what those people are saying. And as long as you remember you're getting different points of view on all of those stations and media streams, then you'll be okay. But you got to remember that they all have their point of view. Even the mainstreams. The Fox News has a certain point of view. CNN has a completely different point of view. You just got to remember, like we used to say in the old days, what's your source? And there used to be a saying in the newspaper business, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing. You know, you just got to, certain news sources are going to be more, I don't want to keep saying legitimate, but they're going to give you a more accurate point of view with as little slant as possible.
Okay. So if
I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for.
No, I will actually, I was just going to rephrase what you said and check to see if it's what you were saying is that we want to be understanding that, hey, when we're leaning on information to make decisions about, you know, who to vote for or where to go this weekend or what to do, then we need to make sure that we've got multiple perspectives that we take into account in our decision-making process.
Yeah, you'll see it like if you go to any of the news sources and you'll see these polls. Polls are all over the place now. You can watch and see, this poll says Trump's ahead, this poll says Harris is ahead, this poll says this and that, you know, and they can be conflicting polls in the same day. You know, and they're talking about, well, she's ahead in Pennsylvania and he's ahead in Michigan, and, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is still trying to be on the ballot in New York, and it's like all this stuff going on, and it's like, well, it's not all true. They can't all be right. So you have to, and a lot of times you have to limit yourself to those kind of things because they're all over the place. And you just have to, again, find a source that you think works for you and keep to it.
So what would you say to as far as a danger or red flags to look out for in regards to if to kind of shock people or bring people out of a situation where they may be getting all of their news or all of their information from one particular source that does have one of those slants that you've spoken about earlier? What are some of the effective ways that you feel for helping people to see or to engage in other options, other parts of the healthy media diet?
Well, I have a brother-in-law who's down the rabbit hole, if you will, on some of these news sites, and I keep telling him, God gave you a brain, use it. You know, you don't have to just follow what Fox News tells you. Reach out to these other sources. They're available to you. It's free. Everything's free nowadays. You don't have to have anything. You don't have to buy a newspaper. You should buy my newspaper, but you don't have to. You can reach out to any of them. You go online and you can have 50 different news sources in like a minute. And just remember that they are slanted. And I mean, if that's your slant and you want to follow it, more power to you. But if you want to be unbiased and be able to make an informed decision, you need to be more than that. You have to reach out. You have to be cognizant of the other side and try to find, because sometimes you have to reach out to the other side and see what's going on.
Yeah. From things that I've encountered and worked with in families, there's a lot of challenges right now in regards to broken relationships due to one having this slant and another having this slant, and the temperature of that has intensified to where it's really caused a lot of rife, a lot of broken relationships. What would you say to somebody who's experiencing that pain of having a particular slant, and because of that, it's broken off a really meaningful relationship with a mother, a father, or a child because of the way that the other person chooses to take in their media?
Well, part of that is the polarization of our country. Used to be you could have an informed decision and you could actually have 2 points of view with a person and still be their friend. You could still go out and have a beer afterward or whatever. A lot of that is gone. There's no middle ground. You're either this or you're that, and if you try to approach the middle ground, they both attack you. And I don't know if we're ever going to be back to the way it used to be, where the middle ground seems to have disappeared on us. And I know I've not had it happen to me, but I know some friends who have been defriended or unfriended on Facebook over posts about one candidate or another. And it's a shame that anybody should lose a friendship, whether it's a family member or just a friend, because of your political views. I mean, come on. You know, no matter who wins the election, we're still going to be around. We're still going to be hopefully interacting with each other. And you just, to lose somebody over something like politics is just, or it's like if you're a Cub fan or a Sox fan, well, people don't break up over that. And those are as heated arguments as I've ever heard. And people still manage to get along, because then the Bears come along and everybody's a Bears fan.
Okay.
But, you know, to lose a friendship or a family member over something as, I don't want to say as stupid as politics, but as volatile as politics is, I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge, and also really highlights the power that we've given media to help shape our minds and our viewpoints to the perspective where we would prefer to break off a relationship than give up or diversify the slant at which we get our information.
And I have friends that are rabidly opposite of what I am on all kinds of topics, not just, you know, the presidency. And it's like, we get along. We argue sometimes. I can argue the paint off a wall with some of these people, but we're still friends. We just have 2 different points of view. And you should be able to have different points of view and be friendly with people. It's just the fact that you can't be is, I don't know why that is.
I think that's a very helpful and wise perspective to have, of though there are things in information that we're going to take from different vantage points, the breaking up of relationships over them is something that we really don't need to have happen.
No, it shouldn't happen.
So this has been phenomenal, the conversation. I really am curious, what is it that you foresee taking place in regards to media? We've kind of went through a time where it used to be specifically print media, and then network media, and now cable media, and then now it's internet and social media. What do you foresee, or if you were to look down the road, you say, well, this seems like it's coming, or this is something that seems like it's going to have a major impact in the future?
AI.
AI? Can you speak more to it?
Sure. Right now there are robots that you can feed notes into, and it will create a story, which is what a reporter does today. Reporter goes, takes his notes, comes back, writes a story. Well, now you could probably, at some point, a robot will be able to take the PHTV council meeting, Payless Heights council meeting, run it through a robot, and it'll be able to kick out a story based on what the video told it. And then you don't need reporters anymore. God knows, or I mean, you still might need editors, hopefully. But reporters may become a thing of the past because AI will be able to do everything that a reporter can do. sometimes faster. I don't know necessarily better, but I would think AI will be the next big thing in the communications business, because newspaper companies or media companies are going to look to replace reporters and probably editors and whatever else down the line with AI, because you don't have to feed it, you don't have to pay it, it doesn't argue with you when you change something in its story, and that and the fact that the marketplace for print newspapers and real reporters is shrinking, because there are places that are going to be just relying on AI at some point. I would expect within 10 years at least, if not sooner. 5 maybe.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredibly helpful for informing us, especially during this time of year as we're approaching an election, and we're all siphoning and trying to find information that's going to inform what it is that we do. But the ramifications of it extend well beyond November, when we're making decisions on what to do with our kids or our grandkids.
Sure.
So I really appreciate the expertise and that you've brought today to help inform us all. Is there anything else that you would want to share that you think is important for people to know as they look to try to find reliable, trustworthy information to inform the decisions that they make?
Yes. Community journalism is still alive and well in places like the Regional, the Reporter, Patch, and that's often overlooked in the battle between the mainstream media, which is, you know, Fox and CNN and the national newspapers. And the local community paper is the one that tells you there's a tax hike coming, or they're going to repave your street and it's going to be messed up for 3 weeks or 6 months or a year in some cases. And that's where the community, because no other media is going to give you that. And sometimes the towns try to do it with newsletters, which is one way to get it out to the people. But we take all of the towns, like the footprint for the Regional Reporter is 9 towns, from Orland Park to Evergreen Park. So every one of those towns has tax issues, and they have street repairs and sewer replacements and people arguing over parking places in the wintertime, you know, dibs and all that. And community newspapers are still around, and they still need to be respected for what they give you, which is the local news, which in a lot of cases you're not going to get anywhere else. We have a reporter who covers the Bridgeview Courthouse for us, and he shows up at the bigger cases, murder cases and things like that. And he was talking to a family member the one day, and he was griping about something he had written. And he said, "Look around." He goes, "Do you see any other media here?" Now, when the first day of the case came, when the guy got arrested for shooting this person or that person, oh yeah, they're all over it. You never see him again. We're there for every court case that happens after that, so we can follow what happens to this guy as the court case. And it takes a long time for some of these court cases. And you go to a status hearing, and it lasts 3 minutes. And it's like, okay, we'll see you in 6 weeks. We're there 6 weeks from now. Nobody else is. And that's what community newspapers can still do, which is give you the nuts and bolts of what's going on in your backyard that you're not going to get anywhere else. Yeah. Maybe on PHTV.
Well, and stuff that is impacting you regularly on a daily basis, multiple times, as opposed to something on the national news which may trickle down to you within days, weeks, or months, and may not even really ever have a significant impact on your own life. Yeah. So,
and it's things like last year a gentleman was killed crossing Harlem Avenue, and it caused it created a call for what to do about it. You know, parking, because parking is always a situation here in Palos Heights. And this gentleman's death, as unfortunate as it was not reported anywhere else. And it created a call for, you know, let's talk about parking. You know, are we going to put a parking lot here? Can we put a parking lot there? Can we tear something down and build something else? You're not going to get that again anywhere else except in a local newspaper. And it's not just us, it's every news Every local newspaper around gives you that kind of information, which is why you need to support your local newspapers one way or another. Take an ad out, buy a subscription, pass it on to your neighbor. Give us a call if you got something going on. I'm here for you.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share from your decades of experience as we all strive to live faithfully and decide how to use the plethora of information that's at our disposal. Your wisdom, your experience really is a help, and I think a great guide for us as we look to make decisions, not just with the upcoming election, but also in other ways in our lives that are really meaningful and impactful. So thank you very much for being here.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you for joining in for this month's Community Bridge.